Everybody. I'm happy to be here with you today. And as Daisy said, I had the pleasure of working on Ask a Career Coach series and a professional development series that we did together. And I see a couple names that I recognize. So nice to have you all with us. And I'm so grateful for everyone joining us today. So again, I'm Christine Horstman. I am a certified professional coach. I'm a career and life coach, and also a corporate trainer or professional development instructor. I wanted to share with you kind of where this came from. It was kind of my pandemic project, really. And what happened is early on in the pandemic, I heard myself saying things that I had learned through my journey with chronic illness. And really, there is nothing like a health crisis to bottom line things. And that's what we experienced collectively, was a collective health crisis. And it had us asking some tough questions about what's essential. And what's essential to me may not be the same as what's essential to you. And what happened is I had met a woman networking years before through a nonprofit organization that I did a group coaching program. I did a group coaching program for women on soft skills. And we met each other and we hit it off, and I really liked her. And I said, I'm not ready yet, but I know at some point we're going to work together. So we stayed connected. And she posted kind of early in the pandemic, who's interested in these topics? And coping was one of them. And I felt like through my journey with chronic illness, I had become kind of an expert on coping, if you will. And of course, I'm trained as a life and a career coach. So I said, I would love to explore this and dig a little deeper into this topic. And so, sorry, I'm trying to get my slides to work here and can't quite get it to advance. Apologies. We tested it right before, so I'm not sure what's happening. Daisy's going to help me. No, it's a little stuck. Bear with us, guys. This is the fun challenges that we're still in hybrid mode of doing our events. See. Well, it's not really the end of the world. We'll see. Daisy will work on it and I'll keep going. Here we go. So my publisher and I started brainstorming this book and this topic of coping. And my journey with chronic illness, it really started when I was much younger, in my 20s. I just didn't really still think of myself as someone who lived with chronic illness until I had cancer when my son was 1 year old. And my son is now 18, so it gives you a little perspective of how long I've been living with things. But after cancer, my body developed several autoimmune illnesses, which is not uncommon for people with chronic illness to have more than one thing happen. But Carrie and I started brainstorming, my publisher started brainstorming out this book. And I knew that I wanted to explore all the different changes and transitions that we go through in life. So it's not just crisis with a capital C, it's some of the natural changes and transitions that we go through, but those can be incredibly stressful. And as I brainstormed this out, I wanted it to mirror a little bit of what I do professionally. So the name of my company is Paper Doll Communication, and my tagline is personal development, professional support. And so I wanted this book to be all-encompassing, almost like a wheel of life exercise, if you will. So there is one part on personal and one part on professional. And when we have a crisis in one part of our life, it impacts the other. When we work on ourselves in our personal development, it improves our ability to communicate and function well at work. And when we work on our professional development, it helps us in our personal life. So it's all intertwined. And a lot of the coaching that I do starts as career coaching. That's where some of you all know me from. I need a job, I need help with my resume, I need help with strategy or interview preparation. And then a lot of it turns into life coaching, because when we start to get into things, we realize I'm holding myself back from opportunities because I'm not confident. I'm struggling with work-life balance. I've made choices as a parent or caregiver to step away, and now I have a little bit of imposter syndrome trying to rejoin the workplace. So a lot of my life coaching does come out of an initial step with career coaching. And this book, as I said, was born out of the pandemic. It's part of the backdrop, and it's born out of the lessons I've learned living with chronic illness and coaching people. And this is the opening quote of the book from Isabel Allende. We all have an unsuspected reserve of strength inside that emerges when life puts us to the test. And that's really the biggest lesson that I've learned in life and as a coach. When times get tough, we have to dig deeper into ourselves, and we need a toolbox in order to do that. And that's what I learned through chronic illness, was building up my toolbox. And sometimes it takes one or two tools, and sometimes it takes 10, 12, 20. It takes going back to the same tools, finding a new combination of tools. So the more resources we give ourselves, the better. And that's what my hope is, that this book will be for others, is that it will be a tool in your toolbox and a resource for you. It's broken down, as I said, into two parts, personal and professional. So in the personal, we talk about health, ourself, relationships, and parenting. Not everyone who's reading the book might be a parent yet or ever, but as adults, we're still influencing the lives of younger generations. We're still modeling our behavior and how we cope and how we deal with stress and crisis and change. And we're all children, right? We all came from somewhere. We all have parents. So there's some pieces in the parenting chapter about exploring our relationship with our parents and parts of ourselves that might still need mothering or parenting. And then the second half is the professional. So our education. Education is more complicated than it was way back in the day. We have not just public and private, we've got choice, and we've got AP and dual language and IB and all kinds of different decisions that we're making for ourselves and our children. And our education system is one of those places that gives us this idea that life is linear, that we progress and we graduate and we move up a ladder step by step. And that isn't really the truth of life for most people. Life is a bit more of spirally and swirly for most people, which is why the career chapter is entitled Life is Not Linear. So we do education, career, leadership, and wealth or finances. And as I researched this book, excuse me, I learned that the Old English meaning of wealth was well-being. And so that just felt like the perfect bookend of starting with health and the lessons I learned out of my chronic illness journey, and capping off the end of this book based on our overall well-being and our financial ability to take care of ourselves and our financial worth. So much of what we deal with has to do with our background experiences and filters. So our ability to cope is often dependent on some of the messaging that we've received. And that voice inside our head that sounds like us actually often started out as someone else's voice, mom, grandma, teacher. And especially in that wealth chapter, we explore our relationship with money, really get into a lot of the different messaging that we've heard. And one of the reasons a lot of us have sort of conflicting relationships with money has a lot to do with a lot of these other voices that we've picked up. So at the end of each chapter, highlights of lessons learned, depending on the chapter. This is an example from the parenting chapter. And then there's also a series of powerful questions and space for journaling. I really believe in the power of writing to help us clarify and define ourselves and our goals. We know that goals on paper are so much more powerful. And we know that when we write things out, it puts it into our working memory in a different way. Coaching, and that's the subtitle of the book, is Deal with It All, Coaching Yourself Through Crisis. Coaching is based on the idea of powerful questioning. And so these powerful questions or journal prompts are there to do just that, to get you thinking, to get you unstuck, to get you to where maybe you're not having a parenting crisis, but to increase awareness to prevent one. Or if something comes your way, we get to a transition with our kids. We know how many stages they go through. And we're better equipped to handle it. And then finally, back to that mindset piece that I was mentioning in particular about the wealth chapter, there are 20 different affirmations at the end of each chapter to help you reframe, re-energize, and remind yourself of who you are, what you want to be, and what you deserve. I would love to do a reading for you guys, and I want to read from the end of the book. It's the epilogue, and I share one of my favorite mantras or affirmations. And I think this will give you a little bit more feel for the book, what inspired it, and my goals in writing it, and hopefully just give you a little bit more flavor for the book. So this chapter is called Walking in the Moonlight. One of my mantras is, I'm walking in the moonlight. Whenever I feel afraid, unsure, sad, unclear, or off track, I repeat it to myself. No matter how lost I am, and no matter how dark it gets, I remind myself that I am still walking in the moonlight. There is always light and comfort shining down on me, lighting my way, even when I don't know where I'm going, even when everything else is obscured from my knowing. I trust that the moon is there every night, even all day long. I remind myself that what I need will come, a new day will follow. I just need to keep walking in the moonlight and have faith. I genuinely believe that we have what we need inside us, but it takes work to find it. It takes work to let ourselves show up fully in all the ways that we need to. And when we can't get to it within ourselves, we will be guided. I believe that the helpers will show up, the teachers will come, the supporters will be there with a shoulder to lean on, but we have to keep moving towards them, walking in faith, putting one foot in front of the other, even when it's dark and we're afraid. I started writing this book both as a gift to myself and as a hurry up and hit your goals because you're now 50, my own midlife crisis, if you will. While everything I've experienced has equipped me for where I am today, the journey of writing this book was such a reminder that the learning never ends. And for me, somehow that always seems to be expressed through my health. COVID, wouldn't you know, decided to test me and help to make sure that I could practice what I preach. When I was close to finishing, when I was down to the last chapter and my first edits, I caught COVID. It had already taken me longer to write with juggling work, family, and volunteer obligations. It felt like a huge setback. And after 54 days of fever, it was clear that I was in long haul COVID territory. I was frustrated, mad, sad, disappointed, and at times bitter. I have no idea how I caught it, as is the case for most people. I had done very little, but the few things I had done, I regretted. I succumbed to everything I had written about, that somehow I actually had control over life in this highly contagious virus. I knew logically that it was surging wildly and was a numbers game, but I kept thinking, how did I get it? And how could I have, what could I have done differently? I was reminded of how hard it is to stay positive when you feel beaten down and are sick and unwell. COVID is called a novel virus because there's so much that we don't know about it yet. But for me, there was nothing novel about the experience of one more protracted, debilitating, and chronic illness. And that's all was depressing. I saw the pain and struggle others were having in my long hauler support groups and social media. Many weeks I would log on and someone in one of the groups was suicidal. I was hit with the reminder of just how devastating the loss of health can be, how much not knowing when things would shift can bring us to our knees with fear. I was saddened by the accounts of friends and family who did not believe the profound fatigue and brain fog and myriad symptoms people had many months after their initial illness. I have seen it over and over in one chronic illness group after another. It hurt my heart and it weighed on my mind. It made me even more determined to get this book finished as soon as my energy returned. But getting better had me doubling back through all the lessons I have learned and shared with you. I had to let go of work and productivity and give in to rest. My business had been thriving, so sidelining work brought up old pain and fears and deep disappointment. I had my down days and my fits and starts, and parts of me are still healing. But I got through it just like I have everything else. And I hope that gives my long hauler, newly minted chronic illness warriors hope. Things do get better, they do shift, and sometimes the new normal holds blessings in disguise. Your struggles, your shifts, your changes, and your challenges are creating the next version of your life in ways that may not yet make sense. Do not despair. Thank you. Thank you. So I am happy to talk about some of the different topics that are in the book. I'm happy to answer questions about any of the topics in the book, or even about the process of writing a book for those of you where that might be something that's on your mind as a goal as well. And I mentioned, I feel obligated to talk about networking since I'm in my old setting of the Ask a Career Coach. And I mentioned that I met my publisher through networking. And it's just such a reminder of you never know the connections you're making, how they're going to develop and pan out. And that networking is really planting seeds. And so I just encourage you to be intentional about making connections with others and to stay open to it. You just don't know where that process is going to take you. It's worth putting yourself out there. I don't know if we have any questions in the chat or not. We've got a quiet crew here today. Yeah, so for me, there's a lot of pieces. With chronic illness, it takes a lot of perseverance just to get to the bottom of things. There's a lot of, comorbidities. There's a lot of complications. I think some of the most stressful times have been when I've changed medications for my illnesses that can knock you for a loop. So finding the right team of healthcare providers is probably like the most important tool, I would say, in so many ways. And that might not just be one doctor. For me, it's always been a mix between what we think of as traditional and alternative medicine. So I do a lot of body work. I've even done hypnosis for pain management that made a massive difference. And that goes way deep into our neuro-linguistic programming. Saying affirmations is one of my go-tos. And that helps us on neuro-linguistic programming and mind-body connection as well. And hypnosis kind of takes that a step further. And then it's creams and my heating pad. While I have connective tissue diseases, I still have a lot of mobility. So getting in and out of a bathtub, thank the Lord, I can do it. Taking a bath is one of my absolute go-tos for anything. I think it is releasing comforting and recharging emotionally and physically. I always joke that when push comes to shove and when in doubt, when you've tried everything else, rearrange the furniture, because just shifting the energy in your environment can make a big difference. And with chronic illness, you tend to spend a lot of time at home. That's part of where this sort of thought process for me came from, because at the beginning of the pandemic, when we were sheltering in place, I was like, people were like, how are you doing? And I'm like, yeah, fine. Like, this isn't really that much different than my life. And I have sheltered in place many times when I couldn't leave the house and wasn't well, sometimes for many, many months. So you have to be able to find the things that lift you up, and you have to be willing to try new things. A candle, fresh flowers, opening the window. Adult coloring books are one of my favorite stress relievers, because it doesn't take a lot of energy or thought, but you're doing something creative and your mind gets busy and it forgets about the other things that are spinning around. When I was healing from COVID and with my immune system, it just took me longer. When I was healing with COVID, I wanted to get back to writing the book and I just couldn't. I had no mental energy, let alone physical energy. And I decided to take an online art class. I have not taken art since I'm 51, going to be 52 soon. I haven't taken art since my freshman year in high school, where we had to take one art elective. And I thought, you know what, let's just do something creative, do something different, get another side of your brain working, and something restorative and healing. And I had so much fun with that group of women. And I actually discovered I wasn't actually half bad at painting. So trying new things. And that's one of the actual silver linings of the pandemic, was this virtual world. It's easier than ever to try new things because we have all of this online and recorded resources. So not feeling guilty to do things like work in your garden, take a painting class, even if you're not well enough to work, is one of the most important lessons I learned. We get put a lot of added expectation on ourselves that if I can't, then I shouldn't. And if I can't, then I better not. And we start to add a lot of judgment and added layers that impede our healing. Thanks for that question. And if it didn't hit the nail on the head for you, you want to clarify, feel free. I put it back to the table of contents so that everybody could see, the different pieces of the book. So if there's a certain place where you are in your journey, that's more on your mind. The book was created to read it, front to back, and it all makes sense. But it also works to where if it's your relationships that are feeling strained, if you need work on your boundaries, you could go to the self and relationship chapters. So you can jump around with it. It's a quick read, but it's also built for exploration if you want to actually do the exercises at the end of the book. But if you're looking for some quick affirmations, you could start there too. Once you have decided to write a book, like starting. Yeah, so the hardest part, some of it is actually just starting to write, and to not censor yourself so much, but just start. If I would go back to my original notes and some of the original brainstorming, the book took on a life of its own as I started writing. And the structure, it still stayed personal and professional, but the internal structure of the chapters and the topics shifted a little bit. And for me, you hear so much different advice about writing. write for 15 minutes a day, things like that. Well, from the way my brain works, it takes me 15 minutes to get in gear and to kind of re-immerse myself to even begin to start writing again. And so that was hard. And it was hard for me, the way that my schedule works and the way that my body works. I don't always know how I'm going to feel when I wake up. So it's not like I could be like, let me get up at 7 every morning and write for 30 minutes before I start work or something like that. So I really went with the flow of when I had pockets of time, I tried to block some time. But I think you do need a sounding board to be able to both process your ideas by writing out some notes, starting to do some loose writing. And then if you can also verbally talk it out with someone to walk through. That said, you have to retain confidence in yourself and your voice and your vision for what it is that you're trying to say, because other people will have their ideas.
Another question. With lifetime chronic illness, how does one find purpose and get out of the mindset of feeling stuck?
Yeah, it's so hard. And that was one of the other things that kind of was a light bulb for me. Obviously, as a career coach, I know that job loss is devastating to people, but there was such, like so much job loss happening at one time that it really put a fine point on it for me, that with the loss of our job often comes a loss of self-identity. So much of us tie our worth to our professional work, to our job titles, to our achievement. And when you are chronically ill, it can be very difficult to work. It can be difficult to find a work environment that allows you to be able to go to all the appointments you need to go to, right? And the flow of not knowing how our bodies may be. So chronic illness, protracted illness often butts into our work identity. And for me, that was something that I really struggled with because I did stop working more than one time. And where I just had to say, I can't do it all. And I don't have what it takes to have the energy for my child and my job and figure out what's going on with this body. So I've been there. And with chronic illness, you often feel like you're chasing your old self, you're chasing your old standards. And you have to allow yourself, it's like what we talk about with the new normal, to say, this is where I am now and what works. And you have to fight off imposter syndrome, that because I can't do exactly the same pace that I once kept up with, because I've taken months, years, time off, that I am not worth what I was once worth. And so I think it really does start with some honesty about what do you want to do? What are you skilled at? What you enjoy doing? What are your interests? But also what might be compatible with your physical needs, and getting creative around that. For me, honestly, that's how I ended up into the career coaching and life coaching. I was working for someone else and it did get hard with my chronic illness. And when I left that, I thought I'm going to just do consulting on my own. And what happened to me with consulting is that it kind of turned into like scope creep, which on the one hand is wonderful. And on the other hand, it gave me so much anxiety because I thought, I don't know that I can meet everyone's deadlines, show up for the amount of hours that they need. And so I started to take a big step back and reevaluate what are the skills I'm trying to use and how else can I use those? And that's when I flipped my business into training and coaching and working more with one-off trainings or coaching individuals where I had a little bit more flexibility, but I'm using all my same skills in reality. In the career chapter, I walk through the basics of making choices for what am I going to do? Who am I going to be when I grow up, right? What do I want to do for a job? So I walk you through the basic process of that. So there are some very concrete tools in that chapter as well. it's really, really hard. That loss of self feeling is like a 1-2 punch on the chronic illness when it impacts your work identity as well.
Question from Sadie. I recently took a solo trip and felt comfortable by myself. It's been a long time since I felt like this. How can I continue to cultivate these feelings of self-confidence and not go back to self-loathing?
Oh, wow. Okay. I don't know if you guys heard that. And so traveled alone, really enjoyed it, and felt good, self-confident. And how do we hang on to that? That's the question, right? How do I hang on to that, nurture and develop what I felt on that traveling by myself, and not slip back into self-loathing? One of the lessons that hits me all the time as a professional coach is that we are our own worst critics. We are so hard on ourselves. And that's why the mindset work and the affirmations are really important. I think capturing how you felt, whether that's a voice memo on your phone to yourself, a drawing, a longhand journal entries about it, or quick bullet points about what was it that you liked, what prompted it, how you felt, why you want to hold on to that feeling. So I think capturing it and having it to go back to can be powerful, because growth is, again, like I said, life's not linear. Growth isn't linear either. Healing, whether that's physically, mentally, emotionally, isn't linear. It's often a 1 step forward, 2 steps back kind of process and feeling. And so you might slip back into some darker days, and also trying to ascertain what are those triggers. When does that happen? What are you saying to yourself in those moments? And how can we reframe that? One of the things that you can say to yourself to already start switching the programming in your mind is up until now. So say something like, well, I'm afraid of traveling alone, right? You can already just start to say to yourself, up until now, I was afraid of traveling alone. You already create a tiny shift in the thought process. And for you, I just commend you for doing that solo travel. I actually, in my chapter, gosh, I think it is on the one on self. I think it's in the self chapter. I talk about my experience of studying abroad in Barcelona. I hadn't been out of the country before I did that. And it was a powerful experience. New places, new settings, new environments, new challenges do get us outside of ourselves. It does give us that opportunity to exercise resilience and to find strength in ourselves that we didn't know we had, and to just have that confidence of, I did it, I'm doing it. Studying abroad gave me more confidence than any other class I ever took in college, any other activity I did in college, any part-time job I had had up until then, because I was functioning in another country, speaking another language. And I actually didn't even realize how well I spoke Spanish until I got there. So that travel piece, I think, is such an incredible way to grow. I think you need to really capture those feelings so that you can remind yourself of them. And if you can use that and turn it into your own affirmations, that can be powerful. Writing out your affirmations, reviewing them, and just reminding yourself over and over can be a powerful way to hold on to that change. And sometimes this is, look, the book is coaching yourself through crisis, but sometimes we do need outside support. So sometimes you're doing a lot of the work yourself, but investing in time with a coach or a therapist can be one of those ways when we have maybe deeper issues or really want to accelerate the process and not backslide.
Okay, we have another question. Can you touch on some of the relationships chapters?
Yeah, so Oh, I'm so glad you asked about that. So I can't remember if we talked about this in one of our job seekers. I'm not sure if we did. So one of the things that I'm trained in is DISC personality assessment and the DISC model of human behavior. And it is one of my favorite things. Myers-Briggs, Enneagram, Strength Finders. You know, I'm a coach. I love all that stuff, but I just find it all fascinating. They're all powerful tools for developing increased self-awareness, improving our emotional intelligence. DISC is my favorite and my go-to because I think it's an easier model to get your head around. There's 4 main personality types in DISC. It can get super complex as well, but because it's 4 main personality types, it's easier to ascertain our own and that of other people. So one of the tools I give in the relationship chapter is explaining the DISC model and how understanding our personality styles and our communication tendencies because of those styles, our innate needs and motivators, it can be a powerful tool with our relationships to increase understanding, improve communication, as I said, but also it gives us a shared vocabulary and a non-judgmental framework to look at things. So a lot of places where we get hung up, when we start to understand personality style, we can reframe and say, oh, that's why they do what they do. That's why I make my husband crazy. That's why he drives me crazy. Now I get it, aha. And I can make small shifts to adapt to the other person. One of the things I always say is we can't change other people, we can only change ourselves. We spend a lot of time wishing, complaining and talking about it, but we can only change ourselves. And DISC gives us a tool to do that. It gives us added skills and strengths and sharpens our emotional intelligence. So that's one big piece that I have there in the relationship chapter. The other thing that I talk about in the relationship chapter is my parents' divorce. My parents got divorced when I was an adult. I was in my 20s. It was still heartbreaking to me. It still felt like a loss of a foundation on some level. It was at the time where I was starting to make choices about getting married. It was a crisis in a certain sense, right? It was a major shift in the family. Everybody had their own emotions and feelings. But what I'm most proud of my family and my extended family, when I say this, is that over time, we developed strong relationships. If you look on my Instagram feed, you will see pictures of my mom and my stepmom together all the time. We spend our holidays all together, and we were able to form deeper friendships and support. And in fact, my mother's mother became really dear, dear friends with my dad's wife. And, if you had said that when it first happened, that this would be how it turned out, we would have been like, what? So again, when we don't get stuck, when we stop resisting the changes that have happened and we start to move through them and with them, and we open ourselves up to possibility, you just don't know the good things that can be on the other side of that.
Christine, what advice would you give to someone that's experienced a really challenging setback or even failure?
Yeah, advice for people who've gotten a challenging setback or failure. Let yourself feel it. It hurts. And let yourself actually feel the emotions and process them, work through it. One of the things that DISC also is great about is it kind of talks about stress recovery needs based on your style. Some of us need less interaction when we need to recover. Some of us need to pull within, withdraw, have space. Some of us need greater connection to process through it. Some of us need a lot of physical outlets to process through it. So again, gaining some of that awareness of how do you best cope with stress and relieve stress is important. I would say to be kind and gentle with yourself. a failure in one area of our life, whether that's a marriage that fails, losing our job, making a massive mistake at work, getting demoted, bankruptcy, whatever part of our life, that's one part of your life. It's one part of your life. It's not all of you, right? And one of the big questions, I think I mentioned that, the pandemic has asking what's essential, right? And as I said, what's essential to me isn't the same as what's essential to you. What success means to me isn't the same as what success means to you. And that's part of the hard work that we have to do of saying, what is my yardstick? And is the yardstick I've been using actually my yardstick? Or was it someone else's? Is it what society told me? Is it what my parents wanted from me? Is it what my partner has been pressuring me for? It's what I once thought and I don't anymore. So when we have a crisis, a major setback, a feeling of failure, or a failure, clarity can be the gift of crisis. And that's why I say, let your feelings process, let's see what rises up, and then figure out what they're telling you. Is it tapping into deep-seated feelings of inadequacy? Is it hunger for wealth? You know what I mean? Like, what is it? And what does that say to you about your worth, how you define success for yourself, and how you define what's essential to you to feel that you have a fulfilling and rich life, and you most feel like your most innate self. The other thing I would say is that most people in our lives already know we're not perfect, right? We're often trying to convey this idea of perfection to ourselves and others. And most of us have had a failure somewhere. And if you haven't, it's coming. It's somewhere around the corner. We all go through these trials and tribulations. It's that, again, exercising the resilience of picking ourselves back up, learning the lessons, and trying again.
What are your top 3 values in life?
Yeah. So for me, when I write out my values, I have enjoyment and I have joy, like in a little bracket. One of the problems with my personality is I can get a little indecisive. Someone's like, oh, I like everything kind of a thing. So I've had to work on that. But enjoyment / joy is one of mine. I'm a generally optimistic person, so that resonates with me. I want to have that spark of joy for my clients, like to help them find that again when they feel stuck and down. To be of service to others is one of my top values. I try to live that out with doing what I can pro bono professionally and doing what I can in my community volunteer-wise, and trying to pass that on to my son. And then my other top value is to really, I have a hard one putting this one. I usually say to myself, like, enlightenment. I feel like when I say it out loud, it sounds like a bit much, but I want to keep growing. I want to keep learning, and I'm trying to help my clients do that professionally as well. Getting clear on your values is an important exercise. That also helps us figure out what are those interests and passions and how well do they align with our innate self. And when it comes to our jobs or who we spend time with, it can help us make decisions. So when we're clear on our values, we might have a choice between, sort of the same job description that you will in 2 different corporations or 2 different environments. And being clear on our values can help you say, what's the right fit for me, right? What's the right environment for me? The other thing I always share about values is that, the book is personal and professional, and this idea of work-life balance, right? I always think of it don't know if you guys can see it on the video, but like a seesaw, right? Sometimes you put a lot of effort in one area and the other starts to go, and then you're like, oh, let me put a little more, and oh, something happens, right? And we're trying to constantly do this with the seesaw. And what I always say is that that little part in the middle, the fulcrum, that's your values. And when you're starting to feel out of balance, if you come back to center, to your values, it will help you realign and find alignment again. Thank you. These are such great questions.
Over the some of the key points of the leadership chapter?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I actually started, well, what I studied in college was political science. And on the one hand, it seems like what, with what I do now, but with political science, a lot of what you start looking at with structure for governments and how the world works in a geopolitical context, so much of it comes down to leadership, right? And we are all leaders. No matter your personality style, you can be a leader. We need leaders at all levels of an organization. We need leaders wherever we are in life, right? You don't have to have a title to be a leader. So for me, a lot of what, again, explore in leadership is that self-awareness of our values and our goals, what success looks like to us, and being willing to make the decisive, hard decisions, to step into our strengths with confidence, and just reinforcing this idea of how critical leadership is. Whether you are leading the PTA and chairing an auction, as a volunteer, or you are the principal of a school, the executive director of a nonprofit, our mayor, we are all called to hone our leadership skills, in my opinion. And if you want to be a leader, you've got to work on your emotional intelligence and your communication skills. To be a leader requires that next level emotional intelligence to really be a great leader, to really be an effective leader. And that requires a lot of self-awareness.
What was your favorite thing about writing?
Oh my gosh, y'all, it has been, I get teary when I talk about this part, such a gift. I've heard from so many different people from different parts of my life since it's out in the world. It just published 2 months, actually 2 months ago, yesterday, it was released. I did a virtual launch party. I had friends from elementary school that I haven't seen since elementary school, show up. So part of that felt like a wedding where you have all these different people from places in your life. And so this avenue to connect and reconnect with people has been such a beautiful gift for me. If I were to be able to go past 3 values, connection is probably in my top 5 as well. And so that was wonderful. It was harder, or I guess I didn't think it wouldn't be hard, but the ways it was hard, I guess maybe I didn't really anticipate. It's a lot to hold in your mind, wait a minute, did I already say that? Or that actually would make more sense in the leadership chapter versus the career chapter. And what am I trying to say? So it's a lot to hold in your minds. And then it had me doing a lot of emotional work myself. There were emotions that just writing, even when I was writing about things maybe on a cursory level, that brought up a lot of different things internally, that some of which I thought, oh, I've already processed this, I've already done the work on this. So that was really interesting, just the power of what came to mind, and in trying to do the work of the book and be helpful to other people. It really, even pre getting COVID, had me doing some emotional work myself. And some of that was a little bit interesting and surprising to me. I would say the one other lesson I learned was, again, I think I mentioned this a little bit, was like just trusting myself. The days I tried to be like, I have to write, I blocked this time and nothing would come out. I finally just stopped doing that. When if it wasn't there, it wasn't there, and I stopped fighting it. Because other days I would sit down to write, and in an hour and a half, I'd have written 3,000 words. And so I just started to just trust myself a little bit differently. That I was working on it, but a lot of the work was happening before it could get onto the page. I just thought I'd change the slide for a second since it's been on that one for so long.
Do you have any questions that you want to put out to the audience? Things that we can-
I would love to know what attracted them to the talk today. What prompted you to say yes? I'm so curious and interested in that. Yeah. And obviously sharing to the degree you're comfortable, right? But yeah, curious of what prompted you.
While we're waiting for the type, I am going to share the link to your website and your book
Oh, that'd be awesome. I appreciate that.
for everybody who's interested.
Yeah, it's available online, pretty much all major retailers. There's an organization, because I'm assuming you're here through the library, you're probably a lot of book lovers in our group, but there is a organization called bookshop.org, and you can put in your zip code and it'll match you to a local bookstore. So you can order it online through bookshop.org, but then the local bookstore gets the credit for it. They're basically a nonprofit. So it's a really cool way to have the convenience of online, but supporting local booksellers.
First feedback, I seem to keep writing the waves of trials, so I thought it would be helpful to see how I can cope and face the storms of life head on courageously.
Oh, I love that. And you're already on the right track, right? The first self-awareness and the desire to do it. And, we're learning our whole lives long. That's a piece that I mentioned in the education chapter too. So I'm so glad you were here, and I hope got a few things to get the wheels turning and some ideas, and hopefully the book might be supportive for you. Thanks for sharing that.
When you write another book,
Yeah, I actually can't wait to write another book. I've learned, talk about lessons learned, I've learned a lot through this process. There's some things I would have done differently, like always, right? And there's some things I didn't say, that I think might work in another book. We'll see. So have some things percolating, but this is so new, trying to enjoy this one. I started writing some novels many years ago, and that is one other dream of mine, to go back to and finish the novels.
start wrapping it up.
Absolutely. If there's not any other additional questions, I just appreciate y'all taking time out of your day to be with us. I enjoyed it immensely. I hope you found it helpful. And I hope that you'll continue to keep your eye out for the great programming that the library offers. I think our libraries are such an incredible resource, and so I'm so proud to do some work with them. And I thank you for being here and taking an interest in the book, Deal with It Doll, Coaching Yourself with Crisis. Life's tougher. Life's tough, but we're tougher. So thanks for coming. And if you do get the book and read it, I would love to know your thoughts. So don't hesitate to reach out to me over social media.
We talked about a lot today, Christine. What are some of your final takeaways from your experience writing, and to people who are kind of starting the process of I'm about to start this kind of self journey?
Yeah. So one of the things is, I think, with the pandemic, we were pulled back. When I first started writing this book, we were in shelter in place time period. And so I think there's an importance and an power in a little more stillness and slowing things down to be able to do the deeper work, the deeper thinking. So I think for both, that was something I learned with the book. Again, the power of stillness and space, right? To make the space and time for what's most important to us. And then, as I said, to me, the gift of crisis can be clarity and new beginnings. And there can be a freedom when we look at it that way, that this is an opportunity for a new beginning. And I would just say, again, on both fronts, for the growth or wanting to put your work out into the world, if you want to write a book, is you got to trust yourself. And that's the theme of the self chapter, is that it all comes down to you. Hopefully you are surrounded by some love and support. We all need that interaction. But when the going gets tough, you got to dig deep inside yourself. And again, finding tools to help you do that. But it comes down to you. You have to have some faith in yourself. Faith in yourself if you want to write a book, to trust your inner knowing and your voice and your knowledge. And it's really the same thing for that journey of self-development and self-growth. Trust your inner knowing. Deep down, you do know what's right for yourself. You do have an inkling of what's that next step you need to take to put one foot forward. And trust and believe in yourself and send yourself the love that you would give someone else. I'm going to let Daisy wrap it up. Thank you all again for being here. I appreciate it and I enjoyed it.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. It was really great chatting with everyone. There we go. I will send out Christine's slides and the link to her presentation from today and the link to where you can purchase her book as well. If you have any questions, feel free to reply to the emails that we send and we can get you in contact with Christine. Or you can use her social media on her website as well. Thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend, great rest of your day. And Matthew, we can go ahead and end it here.